Hey, welcome to the Master Your Mix podcast. My name is Mike Indovina, and thank you for hanging out with me today. I gotta be honest with you guys, this week I had every intention of having a brand new episode lined up. I know we've been running some replay episodes for a few weeks, and then last week we actually had a new one. But as luck would work out, I ended up getting hit with this massive bout of migraines that literally lasted me 6 days and completely rocked me from beginning to night. And yeah, as someone who's never really had migraines before, it was a really crazy thing. So took some time off to take care of myself, go to the doctor, get all that stuff. Everything's getting much, much better now. I'm feeling significantly better. You can still probably hear it in my voice that I'm a little worn down from it, but definitely on the mend, which is great. But unfortunately, because of that, there were some things in the schedule that had to get pushed around, and we don't actually have a brand new episode lined up for this week. So I apologize for that. Because of that, we're going to throw it back to another replay. This time, we're going to go back to episode 109, where I interviewed Vance Powell. So for this week, that's what I've got lined up for you. I apologize again for a whole bunch of replays, but definitely we've got a ton of interviews lined up in the calendar right now, and we've got probably like 2 months worth of episodes in the books. So starting next week, I will be getting back into the swing of things with interviews, getting all new interviews lined up for you guys so that we've got lots of great new content. So with that said, though, here is the replay of episode 109 with Vance Powell. Vance Powell, thank you so much for being on the MasterYourMix podcast. How are you today?
I'm good.
Awesome. For people who might not know about you, which I can't believe because you've worked on so many awesome records, but for people who might not know your story, how you got into music, how you got into production and engineering and all this fun stuff that you're working on these days, can you give us that background?
I can give you a little of it. To be honest with you, I have gone over this so many times. There's tons of backstory for me on the internet. You know, I'm a kid from a small town in Missouri, Joplin, Missouri. I was a nerd. I went to electronics school in high school, then went to computer programming. I had a cool stereo. A friend of mine was a guitar player. He started playing in a band. I started going and hanging out with them, live sound. And then basically from there, it's kind of off to the races. That would have been about 1985, I guess, something along in there. I graduated in 83. I graduated in 82. So, you know, for the first couple of years, we did a bunch of bands. I mixed local bands and had a PA and all that. And then I got my first studio gig in 86, early 86, I would say, 86, 85, somewhere in there. Part-time little studio in my hometown. I did that for a while. There's a lot of story. I'm going to jump over it because it's on the internet. You can find it. There's a Tape Op article a while back that's super in-depth. I moved up to Springfield, Missouri, ostensibly to get out of my hometown, which is cool. You know, my hometown's 40,000 people. Springfield was like 250 with a college, much better music scene. And strangely, it was a little bit of a music hub because of a little bit of backstory. The Ozark Jamboree, or Ozark Jubilee, was a TV show that ran in the 50s and 60s. It was a huge country music show, actually bigger than the Grand Ole Opry, that was filmed in Springfield. So there was a lot of musicians and songwriters, Brenda Lee and a whole bunch of people, Cy Simon, a bunch of like important music industry figures basically came out of Springfield, Missouri. The only one that matters to me is Lou Whitney. Lou Whitney was a bass player, studio owner in Springfield that I wanted to work for his studio. And so I moved to Springfield. I worked at a shitty club for a year and then started working with Lou and touring with his band, the Skeletons. And we toured with Dave Alvin, did a bunch of stuff. And basically that crossed paths with people who got me to Nashville in a roundabout way by getting a job working for Tammy Wynette as a monitor engineer initially, and then moving up to production manager in front of house about 7 months later. And I worked for her for 5 years. I moved to town and moved to Nashville, and I wanted to get into the studio scene here, but it was pretty much impossible unless you started, you know, as an intern. And I'd already had like 5 years of like running a studio and making records, and I was making pretty good money for what I thought was pretty good money at the time compared to nothing. You know, it's pretty good money. So I didn't really pursue the studio thing until about 97, 98. I went to work for a band here in Nashville, or 98, called Jars of Clay. And in 98, 99, I was doing a lot of recording with them on the road. Like we'd record rehearsals and they were working on new songs and just, you know, things. And then in 2001, they asked me to take a leave of absence. I was working for Clare Brothers, the big sound company there.
Yeah.
And asked me to take a leave of absence to make a Christmas record. I'm making air quotes now, Christmas record. We worked on exactly one Christmas song. But we ended up recording about 60 songs. And they decided that they just wanted to produce the record themselves through a bunch of other issues. And so we did. And we ended up working on that record for about 10 and a half months. The last day of recording of that record was September 10th of 2001. So we ended that night, went home, and woke up to a new world. It's crazy. We're supposed to go to the studio the next morning and get all the gear. And it was like, yeah, we're just going to stay home. But so I did this record. It was called The 11th Hour. It ended up being my first Grammy winner. It was like a gold record, sold over 500,000 copies. Around that time I was working on that record, I had taken a leave of absence from MD Systems, Clare Brothers in Nashville. That's where I'd been working as a live sound guy. And John McBride was a good friend of mine, and he wanted to build a studio. And first it was going to be, on the over his tennis court. It's going to be a pool house, air quotes again. But then he found this building, and in January of 2002, and basically bought it that day, and that became Blackbird. Not long after that, he asked me to go to work for him to help build the studio. I had just built a studio, the Jars of Clay. I'd been instrumental in helping that sort of get moving. And so I went over there, and it just snowballed into the behemoth it is now. I was there for 8.5 years. In that period of time, I did a Raconteurs record that won a Best Engineered Album Grammy. I did a Buddy Guy record that was nominated. I did 2 Buddy Guys records. One of them won, but I was, I guess I was still working there. So yeah. Yeah. So, I was a Blackbird until about 2010, when it just made much more sense for me to be at my studio, which I had moved into in 2006 with Mitch Dane, my partner. And that was the old Sputnik, which is down the street at House of Blues, or now called Universal. I think now it's actually back to East Iris, whatever, I don't know. And that we moved here. I was working out of there at 2010 and working at Jack for Jack White, doing tons of stuff with Jack. And I worked really heavy with Jack until about 2014. In 2014, I was working on a record, 13. I was working on a record with a band from Australia, and Jack came by. He wanted to finish Lazaretto, and I was like, I'd love to, but I'm booked all month. And he's like, well, what am I going to do? So my assistant that had been working with him, I said, well, Josh can work with you. I'll come and mix, or whatever you need. It's like a great idea. So Josh Smith had been working with him. He sort of moved up, and then had been working with Jack all this time until just the very end of this last record. That was cool. I still did the last Raconteurs record, although we mixed it here in my place. But 2014, Mitch, my partner, found this building, which is about, it's weird. It's only one, this is 408, and we used to be at 513, but it's actually about 3-block walk down there, down and around a corner. It's straight across the street from Westlake Pro, the old one, across Westlake Pro. And so we moved down here, built all this in 2014, and moved in January 2015. And been here ever since. It's gone through changes. I've implemented Atmos in here. Done a lot of construction, done a lot of things. It was just a blank room when I got here. It was just empty.
So. Yeah. And for people who can't see it, now it looks like a spaceship behind you. You got all sorts of gear around you.
Yeah, this is the wall here of stuff, and then trying to keep my camera from panning right to me. But what it wants to do.
It's all good. That's awesome. So you kind of got your start primarily in the live side of things, and then
but the thing is that even while I was doing live sound, I was still doing recording. I had a 4-track recorder, all that kind of stuff. Had an 8-track recorder for a while, a 4-track recorder for a while. All that. I always wanted to be making records. Live sound teaches you a lot of things. Teaches you how to get sounds quick, how to put a mix together quickly. I think that's why I worked for Jack for 8 years, because he doesn't have a lot of patience. He wants things done. He wants to get things done. He likes to work fast.
Yeah. Well, I was curious about that. I was curious to know what you like. Did you find that there was a lot of crossover between the live sound side of things and the studio? And if so, what sort of elements of that did you feel like you really benefited from?
One of the things that happens with live sound is that you're pushed into situations where you're on an unfamiliar desk, you're on a familiar PA, you've got one song to put a mix together. I mean, I was on the road when I was with Jars, and we had a 52 inputs from the stage, and we were playing in front of 70,000 people, like these big festivals. I couldn't bring my console out through all the people. So, you just got to spin to win. And part of the thing that happens is that you sort of figure out like what has to happen to make this mix come together fast. I think a lot of times that I've seen younger people who obviously only have ever done Pro Tools. Of course, I came up recording on tape with a console, that whole world is they get lazy in the way they're recording by, well, I can put 6 microphones on this one guitar amp, so let's do it because I have 6 inputs, Well, that doesn't really do anything. I mean, it's great that you record that, but why not just put that on one track? If it sounds good, all of them added together, just put it on one track, great. People don't make decisions. And I think that's kind of the problem. The thing that is happening now with a lot of like really bad mixing and recording is that we can do things. I mean, I've gone on, this is a tangent I go on all the time, but just because we can do something doesn't mean we should. And Pro Tools, any DAW-based recording, Logic, Nuendo, Cube-based, pick your poison, Reaper, whatever, allows you to do all kinds of things you probably don't need to be doing. I mean, it's true. You just don't need to be doing all that. Editing tracks to the grid. Don't really need to do that unless it doesn't feel good. And if it doesn't feel good, you should just record it again. Keep recording until it feels good, and then you don't have to do a lot of editing. Now, there are times when that doesn't happen. I just had one the other day. The band had 5 hours between the time they could get to the studio and the time they had to leave to go to the bus. 5 hours to cut one song. Okay, well, you'd think, oh, that's plenty of time. Well, that's 5 hours to do the whole thing. The Beatles did a whole record in one day, but they had been rehearsing for 4 years, and they cut it to 2-track. This is a totally different deal. This is something we have to mix later. We have to do real vocals later on it. All those things. So, and to be honest with you, the band had never really played it, and they didn't play it very well, to be honest with you. So, I passed it to Mike, my assistant, and was like, hey, let's just make this fit a little bit better. And he put it together, edited it a little bit, didn't do it on the grid, but edited it so it felt better. And, it wasn't really anything bad. It's just, the drummer was trying to play something a little too complicated, things that it was the touring band. So it wasn't the session guys, and it's just one of those things. Sometimes you have to edit things. I'm not saying I don't, but I'm just saying doing it for the sake of doing it is a bad idea. Okay, we're going to get a chorus. It's really great. Okay, now we're going to copy that into every chorus. All right, well, that's fucking boring as shit.
Yeah, there's definitely a level of preparation that goes along with it. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, the Beatles did it. Everybody did it. It's not that. It's just make sure it feels good first.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, and something that I don't feel like a lot of bands really focus on before they even get into the studio. It's like a lot of people haven't ever played to a click track, and if you feed them a click track, the idea of that is like scary to some people because it kind of shows their level of musicianship to some degree, but it's something that like I definitely feel like I'm assuming when you're talking about feel, like you're still giving bands a click track, I'm assuming, right? When you're recording them?
Sometimes, I mean, it's, it's one of those things. It's like sometimes you have to, because the production requires that later, right? Sometimes you have to because it's speeding up and slowing down inappropriately, right? Speeding up and slowing down is cool. I mean, if anything, man, bands that push the chorus and pull back on the verse, that's rock and roll there. That's fine. Sometimes you have to. There are bands that I would never in a million years ever say need a click track. I've never, ever in a million years thought that Chris Stapleton needs a click track or B, know that he wants one. He doesn't. I can tell you right now, he does not. That being said, we did a track for somebody else with Chris's band, and we put it on a click. The drummer, Derek Mixon. It's funny, I have a friend named Joe Nixon, and then I have Derek Mixon. So sorry, I got it totally messed up. Derek Mixon, he played with dead on, and it was perfect. But the funny thing is that when he plays with Chris, he kind of plays dead on perfect all the time anyway. He's just so good. But Chris was a little worried that they would want to do additional production to it, like, because again, it was something we were doing for somebody else, right? And then it ended up the guy was like, "No, we love it. It's great." So we didn't really ever need to do it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess as long as at the end of the day, when the band locks in, that's all that really matters. If people are sloppy, then yeah, you got to fix those things.
Yeah, I mean, I've done tons of records where it's like, okay, cool, we're gonna take and let's cut this track to the click because we're gonna do some like drums and samples, loops based production later, if it in spots. Yeah, that makes sense to do it that way instead of doing it with fingers. Which is how Prince did it, by the way. So
yeah.
There you go.
So then, in addition to how live sound has impacted your workflow and just the way you like to work with bands, do you feel like it's had an impact on kind of like the sonic character of your mixes at all?
Of course. Well, see, I kind of feel like that. I kind of feel like this is a dumb analogy, but I sort of feel like I'm the baker of a big sonic pie. And what I want is, right before it goes in the oven, I stick my thumb in the corner. You know what I mean? Right before it gets finished, and here's my thumbprint in it. Yes, it looks like a pie, it tastes like a pie, but there's my big thumbprint in it. And I think the thing is, I finally come across the path that I don't exactly hear things like everybody else does. Like in my head, what sounds kick-ass to me is not what sounds kick-ass to other people, maybe, or it just sounds different, so therefore they like it. I personally am like a huge fan of like a lot of like George Massenburg's work. My friend Jakir King, I love his stuff. I can't do that. I just don't have any way of doing that thing that they do. But, Jakir's always like, "Man, so how'd you do this? Because I don't quite understand what's going on here." And I'm like, you're really cool. You know what I mean? So I think it works both ways, Chad Blake, amazing, amazing work. I like the more lo-fi that he goes, the better I like it. A Latin Playboys record. I mean, shit, man, that's fucking awesome. But then like Peter Gabriel stuff, amazing also. So he's really, really, really talented. There's a lot of guys who are really, really great. I don't think anything I do either compares to it or is anywhere near it. And then they would probably, or maybe not, I don't know, say the same thing about anybody else. You know what I mean? That's the deal is I just don't live in that world. I don't live in trying to beat other people or try to even be in the same category, I had a really bizarre conversation with a very, very, very popular in some circles mix engineer where he was talking about him and how, guys, we got to stay together. And I'm like, I am nothing like you. I'm not even in the same category. You're doing all these big, huge pop mixes and all these big things and all this and that. And I'm doing all the things that I do, but they're all outside of that. They're all on the fringes, of what you're doing. But, I think it just in his head, he was sort of thinking, you know what I mean? That, I don't know exactly what he was thinking, but.
Well, you're kind of like, taking inspiration from other people, but then there's also that like imposter feeling.
Imposter syndrome is, seriously a deal.
Yeah, absolutely. But I like your approach of like you realizing, okay, well, like, yeah, we're not competition to each other. We're all just in here to kind of learn from each other.
Yeah, music isn't a competition. You know, if one of my friends gets a gig and I don't get it, great. But I'm mad about it. You know, I mean, I just am not mad about it. You know, I'll order some drinks on them the next time we go to a bar. You know? Yeah. Drink for Anita.
Yeah. I love that.
But by the same token, you know, I mean, imposter syndrome and professional jealousy are the things that, you know, sort of keep us working sometimes. Do you know what I mean by that? The thing that, you know, I want to win every, you know, a few things. First of all, I should tell you, I never, ever participate in any sort of mix shootout. Ever. I don't give a shit if it's the fucking Beatles. I'm not going to do it. Pardon my language. You know, maybe for the Beatles, but you know what I mean? I'm just not going to do it. Period. Yeah. And I don't believe in mastering shootouts. I don't believe in any of that, because basically what you're doing is you're saying, okay, I'm going to just spread this out and I'm going to see what blooms. And then I'm going to pick the one that blooms and kill all the others. And that's just fucking terrible. It's a terrible way to work. I wasn't mastering or producing a record. I was mixing a record. And a friend of mine, who's a mastering engineer in LA, called me and he had some questions about the mix. And I was like, first of all, why are you calling me about this mix? I'm mixing the record right now. Oh, well, they sent me the file that you gave them. I'm like, well, that's not the master, first of all. And secondly, what are they talking to you about? Oh, well, they're doing a mix shootout, a mastering shootout. And I was like, so the next day I came in, I go, what the fuck are you guys doing? Wait, why is this happening? Oh, well, we just thought we'd get ahead of the game. I'm like, first of all, don't ever do a mastering shootout or a mix shootout. You're asking people to work for free. You're asking people to try to beat other people, right? And so what's the end game? Is it the loudest file? Is it the most natural master? You know, if you didn't do any of that and you just sent it to somebody I suggest or somebody that you want to use and you got it back, you'd be like, wow, that's really great. You know, that you know, so giving a selection of options suddenly starts putting things in this is better than this. This is better than this. You know, better is the enemy of great. Period. You know, I think it's supposed to be better is the enemy of good, but the reality is that better, air quotes, is the enemy of great. Because if you can't just say, that's great, I stand behind that, then why are we professionals? Now, I have had mastering come back to me that I didn't fucking understand. So sorry, I'm going to curse a little bit because I do. But that I just didn't understand. I just was like, okay, well, thanks. You know, this is not going to work. You know what I mean? And I've had people say, okay, well, cool. And then, you know, we're done. Our business is over. I pay them for their time and we go to somebody else. I've also had people go, oh, well, I thought you wanted it so-and-so. I'm like, why? Did I tell you that? Well, it's you and I thought you wanted it, you know, because no, I don't like, especially loudness, being loud. I don't give a shit. I don't care.
It makes sense that if someone's hiring you, then, you know, you have this creative vision for where the song should go. And you also have lots of relationships with people that you trust and that you know how they can add to your or enhance your work. And so, you know, consulting with you about, you know, who's the go-to person you would go to for this. And that to me seems like it would make sense, because then the whole vision gets carried all the way through, rather than trying to, like you said, create this competition and, you know, shooting out all these people just to see like which one maybe sounds better. It kind of just loses the alignment of why they maybe came to you in the first place, right?
Exactly. I mean, I think that, I produced a record last year that when it went to mastering, when the engineer sent it back, I just was like, this sucks. It's fucking terrible. But the artist loved it. I just told him, I just like, well, look, here's the deal. Your name's in like big 24 font, point font, and mine's down here in the 8-6, tiny down here at the bottom. So that's what's more important. I don't, if you love it, great. Not how I would have done it, but If you love it, great. It's got your name on it. You live with it.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I guess, yeah, at the end of the day, like, these people, yeah, like you said, they're the top of the food chain with this whole thing, and it's their vision, it's their project. So if they're at the end of the day, they're happy with it, then that's all that really matters.
And they were the ones, they were the ones paying me to do it. So, I did my part. I put in my 2 cents everywhere, and everybody was cool with all of my 2 cents until it got to the end. And to be honest with you, I think that his choice for who mastered it was more based on relationship than quality. Quality was about job 4 on that. Relationship was more important. So, okay. Sure. There you go.
Yep. Well, I'd love to shift gears and talk a little bit about your productions and the way you mix, because I think you just have so many cool characteristics when it comes to your mixes and the sonic characters that I love. And one thing that stands out to me when I listen to a lot of your mixes is the way you use delay. And you have this really cool way of adding of using delay to add a lot of vibe and character to your songs. And I'm curious to know, like, how you go about deciding when to use delay, what types to use delay, like what settings to use, that kind of thing. Like, what's your thought process behind implementing that kind of stuff?
Well, I'm not a reverb. It's funny, I have more reverbs now than I've ever had, but I'm not really a lover of reverb. And part of, I think, my mix aesthetic has been so formulated in mixing like rock bands on small PAs and trying to like get the maximum amount of SPL and punch out of a small PA as possible. And one of the things that you kind of learn is the more reverb you add to things, the more it ends up just sort of eating that bandwidth, right? Part of my thing is that I'm always trying to get the most direct, closest sounds. Reverb often makes sounds back in the world. So I don't use a ton of reverb in things. Maybe a little bit of reverb on the drums, but I tend to kind of just a little bit on the kick, a little bit on the drums to just make my room a little bigger. Delays are and echoes are what I like. I love the sound. Again, let's go back to my live sound world. If you're in a really big arena, right, and there's 12,000 people there, and the drummer starts playing, if you're in front of house, you hear the back wall behind you. You hear that slap. That's part of the sound, the boom, that big boom, of the kick drum, boom, just part of the thing you hear. I love that sort of sound in things. So I'm always sort of sliding some sort of delay, some sort of pre-echo in the reverb, or some sort of time-based thing for the drums, but trying to keep the initial drum hit clean. You know what I'm saying? So there's always something a little behind it, because I will slide like let's say I pull a plate, like a really short plate on the snare drum or something. I'll slide it 30 or 40 milliseconds back. I'll slide it so it's, that little flammy thing. The reverb actually is flamming a little bit. That creates some complications in the drums. I usually record, I got this little weird Ampex mic, and I put it right like between the drummers, the snare drum and the kick drum, pointing his drummer's crotch or knee or something. I put it down in there, and I'll put that through a pedal. It's literally right there. Hold it. It's right there and right there. Those two pedals and into my desk, and I put a little soft gate on it, so it just kind of closes a little bit. And that's going ta-ta, 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 like an eighth notes thing. And I'll slide that in. So it's super distorted, all the top ends rolled off, crunchy down low on the kick drum. It's like sort of distorted with echo. It's the levy breaks thing. That's what it is, basically. And I'll slide that into the mix. And that's part of that sort of feel. But nothing is actually on the beat as such, except for the distortion part, which of course creates all kinds of harmonics and power and all those things. I really love slap echoes, tape echoes on vocals. I always have. It's always, I mean, I toured the last tour I did. I toured my entire audio outboard complement at the time with 6 distressors, a Summit, the stereo 2-channel, like LA2A thing, that's 2 channels. The Summit made, there's a lot of things. Claire had a lot of those. And then 2 Space Echoes and a PCM 80, which I still have. Maybe it's back in the show. I have it in the show. But I mean, I still have it. It still has all my patches in. And, you know, that was it. So 2 Space Echoes, 1 PCM 80, or it was an 81, I think. And that's it. That was my whole touring complement. Oh, I lied. H3000, which is down there or over there somewhere. Yeah, that was it. So, you know, I just don't need a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So just to clarify, when you were talking about using that crotch mic, I guess you can call it. I know Sylvia Massey likes to call it the dick mic, but when you're using that mic there, you said you're running it through some distortion, and that is kind of that. Are you running that through distortion and a delay, or is the close mic the distorted track?
Yeah, it's distortion first, then the delay. It's an analog delay.
Gotcha. And then are you distorting like the close mic as well, at all? Or
well, it is a close mic.
Yeah, fair. Yeah. But the one inside the kick button. Inside the kick, like, would you be saturating that at all?
No,
yeah.
No.
Okay.
No. Gotcha. It's just that one channel, just one mic.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you said that, you know, the way you kind of described that live reflection of being at front of house, you know, hearing it kind of goes to show how that live influence has crept into your productions as well, you know, and you found you like that vibe. Are you thinking about the band performing live and how this will like kind of naturally happen? No. Okay. You're not really thinking about trying to make a record sound live at all?
No, never.
Okay. Awesome.
Actually, it's funny. I'm always like, yeah, people are like, oh, I don't know how we're going to play this live. Like, well, you figure it out.
Yeah.
You'll figure it out. You know?
Yeah.
You'll figure out a way to do it. You know?
Fair.
He'll give you something to work on.
Yeah. Well, speaking of distortion, another thing I think you do really well with your mixes is the way that you use saturation. And I think saturation is something that can drastically change the tone of an album, can give it a lot of character. What's your typical approach for deciding when you're going to use that as well?
Well, to be honest with you, I never think about... first of all, I've never saturated a mix, ever. I've never used any sort of... I mean, I have a Culture Vulture down there. It's right there. But, you know, it's not turned on at the moment. I would use it as a flavor instead of as the... Like, in other words, this would be the pop of the flavor of whatever it would be instead of being the salt and pepper. You know what I mean? The seasoning. It would be a, you know, tangy thing. And first of all, I don't mix in the box ever. I mix on this SSL. So, you know, there's distortion inherent in that. But as far as like saturation, like adding a saturation plugin or something like that, I never, ever, ever do that. Now, there are ways and there are things that I do that would maybe fall into what you're talking about. A lot of times I will get songs to mix, and either the room mics are too close or they just don't sound like anything, right? And if that's the case, I have a few things I'll do. One of them is there's a really, really great pedal by Stephen Massey called THC, right? I think that's what it's called. Total Harmonic something. I don't know, THC, whatever, you know, like weed, THC. And basically it's a rat pedal. And the UA has one called Raw, exactly the same. The difference is that the Massey pedal has a blend. Now, this is really important. So I will take that pedal and I will put it on the room mics. I will maybe give the knob all the way off. I will turn it maybe 1/8 of a turn on, or a little bit, till you start to really hear the clipping. Then I'll go a little bit higher. Then I'll take the filter and I'll roll the top end off. So now you've got this sort of dark, now because of its distortion, it's starting to compress the whole signal, right? And then I'll add a little more distortion until I get it to it's just at that point that I like. And then I'll move the mix back until the room now has this sort of crushy, pumpy thing that's happening with the compression, the distortion, and the uncompressed room mics. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm mixing the two together.
Yeah, you're running it like parallel together, basically.
Right. Then this is where the weird shit happens. Sometimes ahead of that distortion pedal, I will put a plugin, a delay plugin. And then I will run that full wet. Right? And I'll just slide the rooms back in time a bit. So now I'm moving my microphones, my fucked up microphones I've got going on. I will move them all back in the room. And you start to get that sort of feel of the pump of the low end away from the drums, away from the direct. So that's a little trick. I do that 3 out of 15 songs.
Wow, that's
3 out of 50, maybe 3 out of 25. Who knows?
Yeah, that's cool. And it's interesting too, because there definitely is a fine line between having just the right amount of saturation versus going too far. And knowing
the thing is, a lot of people are sort of, part of the thing is for young people who have never recorded on tape or worked on a tape machine, the thing to know, the big, really important thing to know is tape machines weren't there to make distortion, period. They weren't there to create saturation, period. They weren't there to make things sound warm, period, or fuzzy, period. All of those things are complete bullshit. Tape machines were there to record the signal as clean and as pristine as they humanly designed them to be, as they were humanly designed to be. Now, the side effects of tape were that tape has only so much dynamic range. So if you hit the tape a little hard, what happened is the tape would saturate, which was distortion, but it would saturate in a very analog way that was very pleasing to our human self. All right. So using a tape machine wasn't this thing that like, oh God, we want this to be warm and fat and blah, blah, blah. No, you did all that ahead of time. You tuned the drums correctly. You put the right mics on. You used the console. You used compression. You used all those things. Then you put it on tape. And when you played it back, you went, wow, that sounds good. Because it's supposed to sound good. Just like if it goes to Pro Tools, it's supposed to sound good. Now, what people did is people manipulated the machines to get sounds that they weren't able to get with anything else at the time. And what they would do is they would underbias the snare drum track. Now, underbiasing the snare drum track means you've got elevated high end. That means you don't have to turn up so much high end, right? It would elevate that, and it would also slightly decrease it would increase its point or decrease the point where it's saturated. So now the snare drum would go, and there's no compressors involved. Just crash. If you listen to Hall & Oates records or listen to like anything made in the 80s and 90s, you're going to hear that sound because that's what people did. Okay, so by the same token, people would record, like a perfect thing for me is when I record on tape, if I'm doing a 16 track, which I won't do 24, so I'll just do 16, I put the room mics on 1 and 2, the kick drum on 3, the snare drum on 4, toms on 5 and 6, and overheads on 7 and 8. Now, to be honest with you, that's really not true. On 16 track, I would just do a room mic, a single room mic. I put the bass on track 1, room mic on 2, kick on 3, snare on 4, and drums, overheads and toms, 5 and 6. I'd mix those together. So now we've got 6 tracks, and that leaves us another 9 or 10. All right, or 9 really, because you need 16. So I would take, if I was doing this is also nerdy technology stuff. If I was doing tape right now, I would do a 5/250 alignment, CCIR, which is the European standard on my studio machine. Sounds great. And then that's 5/250. No, 3/250. Sorry, 5/250. It's been a while. That's 8/185 on my machine. But on tracks 3 and 4, I just do 3/. Now, why is that? Well, I'm getting 2 extra dB of headroom on the kick and snare. That's the deal before they saturate. And 15 IPS. This is the important part. 15 IPS, not 30, 15. So that gets you this, groovy tape, low frequency bump right exactly in the right spot. You want the low frequency bump. And it means that that top end, because we're doing CCIR, is really even and very, very smooth and saturates really nice. So especially for toms and cymbals and things like that.
That's very cool. Well, it's interesting you were talking about the snares and how people would calibrate their machines to get that length off of it. And that's actually one of the things that I noticed when I listen to your mixes a lot too, is that your mixes, when it comes to the drums and snare in particular, they feel like they have a lot of length and body to them. I'm not hearing just like a quick little tick, like most people have with their snares.
Fuck that.
Yeah. It sounds like the snare occupies that space between the notes, and it sounds really beefy and full.
That's exactly what I'm wanting it to do. Occupying the space. It needs to be a note. I tend to like all the rattly shit. The more shit rattles, the more I like it. Because to me, that's just a thing. I mean, look, anybody can make, I don't want to say anybody, because I don't think I can, but, really perfect drums with like gated toms and gated kick and gated snare. You know what I mean? And fuck, just get easy drummer. Just get easy drummer. That's not how the world is. I love it when the snare drum's rattling and on floor tom hits and all that. Listen to Led Zeppelin stuff, man. I mean, come on. There's all kinds of things going on in the drum tracks.
Absolutely. So then as far as getting that body and that length on those snares, is it because of the way you saturate the tape machine at all? You said...
No, it has nothing to do with that. Basically what the deal is, it has to do with tuning. It has to do with dampening the snare, tuning, getting the tuning correct. And then like ignore this tape machine. Let's just ignore, I have Burl converters, so we'll just talk about it for just doing a purely recording thing. What I'll do is I'll do a little bit of compression on the snare with that 1176 right there, that one, to tape, but just a little bit, because I just like the way the 1176 sounds on it. Super slow attack, super slow release, or super fast release, right? Basically, the attack is all the way up, or all the way down, however you want to look at it, all the way to the right, and the release is all the way to the left, all the way to the right. And so what that's really just doing is it's allowing the transient to go through, and then as the transient goes through, it starts to compress the meat of the snare. That stretches it out a bit, right? Then having the release almost immediately means that the top of the peak is what comes down. Now the snare cracks through, the top of the peak gets just leveled off a little bit. Then it opens up because it opens the compression. Now the backside stays up. See what I'm saying? Because you're manipulating gain. Oftentimes, if I'm tracking like a rock and roll band, like when I was doing Tyler Bryant, I actually used a couple things in parallel in my mix path, not my tracking path, not my mix path, my tracking path. I have a transient designer and I have a distressor, and I will send that signal to them and then bust those two back into my track to tape. The transient designer will be with the attack turned way down and the release very long. So now you get this long, right? And then the distressor is just basically at 4. I think the attack is at 5, and the release at 4. This allows the attack to pass, it compresses, and then holds it for a bit, and then releases it slowly. And I would just take those two and just add them in almost imperceptibly. I'll add them in until it gets louder, right? Then I'll turn them off, and if it turns down a dB, I'm like, cool, turn them back on. And then that just adds a little bit of processed sound to the snare. The second thing I do is I never record separate microphones, ever. I record the top and the bottom combined together. I want one track of snare drum. And so in the end, yeah, sometimes that snare drum is a full quarter note in length. And I'm totally cool with that.
I love that approach. I haven't heard anyone describe it that way, but it makes a lot of sense that when you use that transient designer to get the length and you have the distressor there.
I do the same thing on the kick drum. boom, pow, boom, pow. That's rock and roll to me. That's what I love that. And so therefore, I'm not using, in that situation, a kick drum without a front head, not miking it inside it. This is a 24 or 26 inch or 28 inch kick drum, solid head, no hole, mic'd from the front. So that drum is boom, it's a note, boom. And I love that knock, that conk thing that happens.
Gotcha. Because if you took off the front head, then you wouldn't have that sustain.
No, you don't have the note.
Yeah.
It sounds poop, 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 pop, pop, pop. That's cool. That's just not for me. And if you're making a Steely fucking Dan record, maybe. Of course, if you're making a Steely Dan record, a drum machine plays its first time. Then you hire a drummer to play it. Then you use delays to line up the drummer to the drum machine. Then you replace all the sounds. So yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that approach. And I love the way you commit to your tracks. And I think that is really important. Like,
don't get me wrong. I mean, I burned myself before, but matter of fact, I just did a record. This is sort of one of those double, like, you can't exactly say who to blame on this, but the drummer changed snares. And when he did, he didn't take the strainer off the other one. So there's just these snares rattling through the track. At the time, I was like, it's kind of cool. And now I'm like, oh, fuck. I want to get to mix it. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, he just took the snare off and set it down next to the drum kit on its side with the snare still on. Like, even though I have all these little pads you can set it on to kill him, he didn't do it. So it's kind of everywhere.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, it's look, here's the deal. Is someone going to listen to that and go, I really want my money back. Okay, Apple, I don't like this song. I want my $1 back. You know what they say? Fuck you.
Love it.
I mean, it's not like you can go down to Musicland and say, I hate this record. Here you go.
True. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, you had mentioned another thing that makes your snares sound the way that they do is the tuning. And I was wondering if you can give us some insight into how you like to tune your drums and how you use the tuning to help you with that size as well.
Well, I like them tuned to the key of the song. So the snare should be the root. Toms, should be the 5 and the 3 or whatever, whatever it is. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, 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 up, down. Root, 5, 3. A lot of drummers don't get that. Some of them can't do it. I like drums tuned higher, like toms, floor tom, higher than most people would think. I know people who are just like, yeah, I like them really low, like tubs. And I'm like, okay, cool. Sounds awesome. Boom, pat, tud, boom, pat, tud. Like, okay, well, that's a sound. And then the floor tom's like, boom, boom, boom. Okay, great. Well, sounds cool through a PA. It's not going to sound very cool in my headphones or on my, my speakers. It's going to go poof. So then if I'm mixing, I will find a drum and I'll tune it. I'll find one that's tuned to the key of the song and I'll just, augment it with something that goes boom instead of tuh.
So then when you're tuning, because you said you like to tune it to the key of the song, do you ever use like those tune bots or anything like that? Or okay. It's all by ear. Yeah. Hey, day, hey, bang, hey, bang, hey, bang. You know what I mean? Like, get it close. Just get it close. A lot of people don't even think about that. It's true. Yeah. I mean, drums are one of those weird things where, like, it's not like, you typically carry around a tuner to tune your drums, right? So you just have to at least have an idea of kind of how it is in relation to the song, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it being out of tune is cool. You know what I mean? Like sometimes I'll be like, okay, cool. It just needs to be a little sharper. Like let's make it a little sharp. Bang, 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 bang. Let's make it a little sharper. And then it sounds adds some tension and that's cool. But most of the time it's just ding, 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 bang, 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 bang. Try to get them as close as possible. And, take the snares off and then try to tune it so that it doesn't have like wacky do overtones, all that stuff. every now and then there's a guy here at he works at Blackbird named Paul Simmons, and I'll just hire Paul to come over. I'm like, can you get these, get all these drums tuned up because it's sort of close, to something. And then once they're close, then you kind of have an idea of where they're going and all that.
For sure. Yeah, it's good to have a good tech that you can call on whenever you need it. Well, another area of your drums that I really love the sound of on a lot of your records, like when I listen to records like the Clutch record that you did and Chris Stapleton, when I listen to those, you have a lot of like cool ambience in the way you treat your drums. And I feel like you can always hear that room tone, whether it's a big sound or a tight sound. Like there's always still at least a little bit of that intimacy and that feel where you like kind of maybe that kind of live feel where you feel like you're in a room with people. So I'm curious to know, when it comes to approaching ambience in your mixes, how much of that is stuff that you've tracked in the tracking stage and it's like a live room mic versus something? Oh, it is. So you're not adding anything in post ever? Not really.
Yeah. Sometimes maybe.
Yeah.
Like, well, the Clutch record was all done here in my room, right? My room isn't that big. It's 25 by 23 or something with a 16-foot ceiling and oblong weird shaped room. But whatever ambience you're hearing on the drums is mostly the room. And that knee mic is part of all that too. There's a mic out in front of the drums, Coles. Like if you're sitting behind the kit and if you could see through the rack tom, right, onto the floor in front of the kick, right? It's like 2.5 feet in front of the kick, and then maybe 2.5 to 3 feet over to the hi-hat side. There's a mic I call front, and that's part of it. And that's that sort of, honestly, it's just that distance thing that happens with the kick drum. That sort of that hit that's a little farther away. And it kind of gets to the bottom of the toms, it gets to the bottom of the snare a little bit. It just kind of gets a bunch of stuff that's over there that I don't really have I have a bottom snare mic, but I don't have a bottom tom mic, so kind of gets a little body there. You got to futz with the phase a little bit to get all that to work. But, or I should say the polarity. But usually that's it. That doesn't mean that I haven't added a reverb or something. I really like this thing. It's off at the moment because it makes a bunch of noise. It's the fan is noisy. And this is a DN780. So it's an old Clark Technique from 1985 reverb. First studio I worked at in Joplin. That's the only reverb they had. And so I had a pair of them. I may have 3 of them. One of them works. And but the fan is loud. So I leave it off. But it's awesome for that like kind of 80s AMS snare reverb thing, And it's got a patch called Live, which is literally like in the air tonight in a box, It really is. Or really, I should say it's Intruder in a box, more so than in the air tonight. It's like, that Peter Gabriel track Intruder, that's where the gated drums came from. Everybody says Phil Collins invented it. No, Phil Collins didn't invent it. Phil Collins played it on Intruder, which is a Peter Gabriel record.
Fair. Yeah. So that's cool. So you're just really kind of just as far as getting your ambience and your room tone with your drums, it's more just a matter of getting creative with the positioning of the microphones.
It's just part of my thing. Again, it's just part of my thing. It's like, it's part of the thing that I want to hear. What I want to hear is what I need it to be. So I just turn knobs until it works. Sometimes, like I have this little loop that is it's a rat pedal. It's over there. It's a rat pedal and an old Roland or a Boss DM100. All right. Now, those two things combined together create an ambience that is not exactly, I'm not able to do it in the box. Right. That thing I did earlier, I was talking about with the room sound and the rat pedal and all that. That's kind of it, but kind of not. This does its own thing. Right. It's a rat pedal, like an original Proco rat pedal. Doesn't have to be anything special. The one they sell now would work. and a DM100. Not easy to get, kind of expensive these days. Roland or Boss DM100 is a Bucket Brigade delay. It's kind of terrible sounding and awesome, right? It's in a weird box. It's about big, 8 inches wide and 3 inches high. It doesn't really fit in a rack. It was meant to go on top of your guitar amp, I think is what it was meant for. I use that on the snare drum quite a bit to provide an ambience that I can only describe as being cool and I don't understand. I mean,
happy accident.
Yeah, well, it wasn't exactly an accident. It's like the one thing, it's like the one thing I use that people all the time are going, I don't know what's going on in there. What's happening? And I show it to them. They're like, oh, I wouldn't have expected that. I think it's reverb or something, And sometimes I do stupid stuff with it. I make it so that it goes ding and rings. So it spins. So sometimes it's doing even weirder stuff. And it may be in the mix 20%, 30%, but it's so important to me that it actually gets a fader on my desk. All this shit, not all of it can get a fader. Not an automated fader. That one gets an automated fader because they use it quite a bit. Sometimes you use it on vocals. Sometimes you use it on bass. Sometimes it's cool when the bass is going. You know what I mean? And the drummer played that. You know what I mean? Sometimes that's cool. So, just things like that. I think the thing for me in delays over reverbs is that I like things to be a little complicated. Like I like when things are kind of, it's hard to see if you don't see the video, but I like it when the mix sort of shakes a bit. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a wiggle in it that you can't exactly get your head around. And not like the whole mix, but just, it's just more complicated than what people play.
Yeah, there's a bit of a bounce in between the notes kind of thing.
Yeah, there's not that there's no space in it, but there's something going on. I have a pair of PCM42s right here. I use them at like right now they're at 119 and 112. All right. 119 and 112. I have the ×2 on, so they're half quality, right? And then I have it set so that the envelope modulates them, right? I use that on my lead vocal all the time to make the lead vocal spread out. But they're modulating. I mean, they're bending. The time is bending. They're just bending with the envelope. And because they're at different times, they're bending different widths. So one's on the left side, one's on the right. And it's like PSP makes a PCM42 plugin, by the way, that will do exactly what I'm doing with us. And I'm not saying that I've never not used those. I have used the PSPs quite a bit. It just requires you use 2 of them. Two plugins.
For sure. Going back to the room mics that you're using, are you ever doing any, are you adding compression to those at all? Or
Sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, actually adding a limiter, EMI limiter.
Cool. And that's just so that it creates like a consistency throughout the whole track?
It just creates that cool pumpy thing, that little pumpy deal. And, the second you turn that thing on, suddenly the cymbals are too loud. So you have to EQ that out. And, you got to futz with it a little bit to get it to work. My room doesn't do the thing that like East-West does. Like if you go in East-West, you can put up a pair of mics in there and it just immediately sounds like awesome room, right? Well, because it is an awesome room and it's big, it's a pretty big side. And I'm not saying like the big room at East-West. I'm saying like Studio 2, right? Which is amazing for drums. It's kind of narrow and long, so it's not so deep, but it's wide. Pair of M50s in there. It's just unbelievable how good it is. Same thing with Blackbird in Studio D. Blackbird's kind of that way. My room isn't that big. It's a very complicated room because of the acoustic treatment on the wall. I've got these curtains in there. Opening the curtains makes one sound. Closing them, makes another sound. There's gobos in there. There's B3. There's piano. There's drums. There's all this stuff in there. So there's not this real clear room sound. What there is a very complex, complicated, diffuse sound, not diffuse. I would say very diffused sound.
Gotcha. So then for people who are listening to this that might be working in smaller rooms or maybe, even a basement or a home studio, that kind of thing, what advice would you give them for kind of getting the most out of a small room?
The thing is you just got to make the room, you just got to make sure that the standing waves in the room are broken up with something. I'll tell you what works really well. Bookcases and books. Those work really well. Curtains, blankets, theater curtain, like if you can find a velvet theater curtain, things like that. The reality is that the smaller, depending on, like if you're in a basement, a friend of mine has a studio in his basement, by the way, here in town, about a mile from me. And the ceiling is really low. I mean, the ceiling is like, standing up, it's maybe a foot above me. But the way he's got his drums set up, he just made the most of it. He hung his overhead mics off the rafters above him. He insulated some of the rafters and some of the others he left alone. He's got a concrete floor and he's got this stairway that goes up, and the stairway is awesome sounding. So when he's cutting drums, he just has a mic bolted to the ceiling in his stairwell. He's got this mono mic in his stairwell. It sounds great. Now, it only goes up one floor, but it doesn't matter because there's a whole stairwell there. And it's at the other end of where his drums are. And it sounds great. The only problem really is that it sounds like that room. And so at first it sounded like a concrete basement, which is what it is. A few carpets in there, it got a little bit better, but then too dead. So then he had to kind of deal with some of the wall reflection. And over the last couple of years, he's got it sounding great. It's just, you just got to try things. You got stuff on your walls and you don't even have real drums.
Yep. Yeah. So I'm in a apartment, so I can't really play my drums here, so it's just a mixing room here. But yeah, I mean, it sounds like the key to just getting the most out of a small room is to really
The thing is, it should sound good when you speak in it. That's the deal I found with control rooms. If I go in a control room and I'm talking, I literally will go in, like, let's say we're going to go stop by a studio and check it out. I will go in and stand behind the desk, and I will just stand behind right where the speakers are, right where I'm going to be sitting. And I'll just be like, talk to people and listen to what's going on around me. And I can tell pretty quick if I want to work there or not.
Yeah. Yeah. But I guess the other thing too is just like walking around a room and just trying to find the cool spots of the room. Like you said, like your buddy's stairwell, if that's got some character to it, then use it. Maybe it's like a matter of opening up a door and recording a mic down the hallway or in a bathroom or something like that. Sometimes you can get some cool character out of that too, right?
My room is square, sort of rectangular, sort of, but then it has this little cutout here, has a little notch. And the first session I did here, I put drums in it, and we got the police called on us, which was awesome. That's a whole nother story about having neighbors. The neighbors called the police because she could hear drums come through the wall. And she was like, and I own a business. She owns an eBay business, but she just didn't like hearing it. But the thing is that there are rules. Like it has to be at the property line, a certain volume. It was nowhere near that. Right. So the cops are like, yeah, well, ignore her. So I moved the drums to the other side of the room. She never complained again. There's other stuff too. We actually built a concrete wall to block us out. But yeah, she never complained again. It was fine. So now, 7 years later, I put the drums back over there. Nobody's complained. And that sounds better over there. So I had it right the first time where it was in that spot. And it kind of gets the drums out of the main room and gets me more main room. But, live and learn.
Yeah, for sure. Right on, Vance. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out, and you gave us so much great insight into what goes into your records. And I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you got your family over, you got a busy day. But if people want to learn more about you, follow your work online, and maybe even potentially work with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Well, my management company has a website. It's globalpositioningservices.net, I think, something like that. But you can just really Google me. I have a strange name, and there's been enough stuff on the internet. If you Google me, I'm the first guy who comes up. So there is another Vance Powell, by the way. He's a realtor in Austin, and he hates the fact that I'm the one who comes up first. I am confident that he's paying somebody for better Google Analytics than I am, because I'm paying no one. But I do enough of these podcasts and things and have enough whatever going on that the whole first page of Google is me. So you can Google me. VancePowell.com is my website. If you go there, you will find nothing more than my phone number and my email. Beyond that, I mean, I'm on Instagram, Vancelot, on Instagram at Vancelot, at Vancelot on Twitter. And then I'm on Facebook, but I have weird rules about Facebook. I only friend people that I know. Now, on Twitter, I am a little more active. I have a lot of political opinions and opinions about things and people that I will, get on. So I am on there. A lot of retweeting,
Right on. So that was my interview with Vance Powell, and that was a lot of fun. I thought it was really interesting to hear about all the pieces of gear that he likes to use, and I thought it was really cool that he incorporates a lot of guitar pedals into his processing. And I know that you couldn't see it because you're just listening to the podcast, but for me, I could see his studio, and he just has this wall of pedals that he's just got Velcroed up there, and it's cool to see how he connects everything, and just to hear how he thinks outside of the box a little bit, and he uses some kind of uncommon pieces of equipment in the studio. And obviously, it's a big reason why he has the cool character and sound that he does. So I thought it was really cool that Vance went into some of that equipment, and also really interesting to hear his approach to drums, and especially when it comes to things like snare. I loved hearing how he incorporates the transient designer and the distressor and how he combines those into his sound. I just think that that's a really cool approach to getting that body and the length out of the drums. And it's great to hear some people's process for that stuff, because, for me personally, I hate snare drums. Snare drum is always the biggest challenge when it comes to a mix, and I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to that. But I just think Vance's snares sound so cool, so I'm definitely going to be implementing some of the suggestions he made here today, and I suggest you do as well. So I hope that you found that interview helpful, fascinating, and if you did, as always, definitely make sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. That way you're notified about all new episodes as they go live. And also make sure to visit MasterYourMix.com, which is where I help out musicians with creating pro-sounding recordings from their home studios. And you definitely want to check out The Mixing Mindset. That is a book that I've got on there that inside of that book, I break down the entire process of mixing from beginning to end, talking about the different gear that you should be using, how to dial in settings, what to be listening for, what steps to take, what order to work in. That way it takes out all of the guesswork from your process. So once again, check that out. It's called The Mixing Mindset, and that's available at MasterYourMix.com. So that is it for this episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to chatting with you in the next one. We'll talk soon. Have a good one. Thanks for listening to the Master Your Mix podcast. Please make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and leave a review. If you have any questions or comments for the podcast, send an email to questions@masteryourmix.com. And for more information on how to create pro recordings from your home studio, visit MasterYourMix.com.